in a very prestigious part of the UK. I don't know if you've ever heard of Luton.
Very
prestigious.
Yeah.
Yeah, number one.
Luton is a failed city.
The average English-British man is too busy fighting against his fellow man for some football game as opposed to fighting against anything important. The fact you cannot walk down the street alone at night with a nice watch that you worked your life for without getting stabbed to death by somebody who wasn't even born proves that it is a failed nation state. And I absolutely not recommend anybody with any money to
Do you think Dubai is a good place to raise kids?
No, I think it's a good place to raise girls. I don't think it's a good place to raise sons for one reason and one reason only. It's too safe. I feel like the paranoia and the social awareness you need to walk through the world in most places, you wouldn't get it growing up in Dubai. But unfortunately, the world isn't as nice as Dubai. Happier with them being raised in Eastern Europe. They might get punched in the face. Good. You get punched in the face sometimes. That's what life's about.
Recently, I just moved out of my parents' house for the first time, and this is how it looks. Throughout my whole life, I've always lived in a suburban area, an area just outside a small city called Norwich in the east of England, somewhere that statistically is a very safe place to live. But towards the end of 2022, I got accepted onto a course that I'd applied for, but the role was based in Luton. Family and colleagues at the time told me I was mad at even the thought of me moving there, but I definitely wasn't going to turn down the opportunity of my apprenticeship. I got advised before I moved to live outside of Luton, as indeed there are some really nice places outside, but there are also some certain places within Luton as well. But I was funding this life myself, and by my terms I couldn't really afford to be renting and have a car at the same time. So I had to live closer inside of Luton without a car. This meant that for a whole year I was prepared to walk everywhere, even if it meant I had to walk alone at night, being after work going to the gym. If it wasn't for my one friend that I saw while living there, I had absolutely nobody. Being completely away from friends and family back home, outside of my working hours, I spent all my time either locked away in a box room, forcing myself to work on my laptop, or I'd be working out in the gym late at night. But I just embraced this mentality of actually appreciating this short-term suffering I was going through and tried to turn it into something productive. During the year of living there, I broke up with my girlfriend too, so other than the occasional visit home or work trip that I had, I never really left my room. There was nowhere even that was of walking distance outside the house that I could just go to, not even somewhere like a park. I lived at the back of a Vauxhall factory, walking distance to the airports with planes going overhead, police sirens constantly going off at night because I was close to the centre. Basically very industrial, of which my housemates had the same issue. The experience I had living there definitely at times forced me well out of my comfort zone. Within my very first week of moving there, I had a small Tesco near my street, and the first time I went in there, I saw someone immediately run out with a crate of beers. The guy working on the till didn't even attempt to stop him, and I basically asked why he didn't do anything about it. He just said that this guy was a regular shoplifter and that they get it all the time and there was just nothing that they could do. Another time when I'd first started working there, I got given a laptop and a case to come with it. So the first time I got it, I obviously walked home carrying it, quite clearly showing that I was carrying a laptop. This guy who was sitting on the pavement, literally just necking beers at 5:30 in the evening. As soon as he saw me walking past with this bag, he immediately got up and started walking in my direction. Basically, there was this bridge that I had to walk over to get to my house. So by the time I got to the other end of it, I stopped and waited to see if he was still coming my direction. And sure enough, he was there. But fortunately for me, at the time, I was a lot quicker than him. One of my pet hates is paying for a taxi or an Uber, especially if I'm alone. I mean, I was tight for money regardless living alone, but I'd refuse to get an Uber for anything, and I never did pay for one the whole year. But this meant that I had to walk places while being pretty vulnerable. I was going back home to see my family one night, and I had to walk through a graveyard to get to the train station. At the bottom of the graveyard, there was a footpath that wasn't well lit. It was at night, and as I came out of the graveyard and started walking down it, I turned around and right behind me was a tall guy dressed in all black, just staring at his feet. Meanwhile, I'm wearing a half-decent watch, I'm carrying 3 laptops, a camera, and a load of camera gear just in my rucksack. sacked. Luckily for me, this guy was definitely on something. There was another time where I had to get a bus home from London to the centre of Luton. And on a Saturday night about 1 AM, there was a gang of about 5, all in balaclavas, walking towards me in the streets. And at that point, I'd instantly turn around and I'd choose to spend an extra 20-30 minutes walking around in a different direction just to try and avoid people. Because in that situation, why would I even take the chance of walking near them? For me to just get a haircut, I had to go to the town centre and go down all these dodgy streets and walk in tunnels under roads. But this one time, afterwards, I decided to get a McDonald's. In this McDonald's, I had never seen so many homeless people begging for food at the tills. And I could tell that half the people who were in there were just sitting in there because they had nowhere else to go.
Failed city.
Going back to the graveyard, I went through it all the time because it saved me 15 minutes of my journey whenever I went into London or left Luton. My mum decided to visit once and we ended up walking through it during the day. And after she saw it, she urged me to never go back through it. But me being me, until something happens, I'll just go along with it. I mean, I must admit, considering I'd already come across dodgy people in it. But there was this one time, it wasn't even that late, it was about 8 o'clock at night, but it was winter so it was still pitch black. And I was walking down the graveyard, as most places in Luton have steep slopes, and I just started to hear voices behind a tree. So I instantly turned off my phone torch and start to slowly walk around this area where I could hear the voices. Meanwhile, again, I'm carrying a suitcase and I'm carrying loads of laptops on my back because I was en route to visiting home. But there was at least 10 guys, and I say guys because they definitely weren't teenagers, all just huddled in a circle right in the middle of the graveyard. I mean, you can probably assume what they were doing. As you can imagine, it's completely pitch black being in the middle of a graveyard at night. But I just remember being so on edge as I'm slowly just walking past them, meanwhile trying to keep low to the ground so they just didn't see my shadow, as if maybe even one of them saw me there, especially with everything on me. They so easily could have jumped me. But throughout the whole year of living in Luton, my closest mates visited once, mainly because they didn't feel safe there, and I don't blame them. Having listened to these stories, you might think that I'm an absolute idiot for putting myself in these situations, and you're probably right. But the point I'm trying to get at, I've never had an issue with just being able to walk alone at night, even just having headphones on. I can never walk out my house with headphones on, just because you always had to be so aware of your surroundings and always just looking behind you just to make sure no one was going to run up behind you. Yeah, it was a mad year. But I know that this year I have changed a lot, not just physically, but more mentally. I know now whenever I hear the Tate brothers talk about how traumatic their early life was living in Luton, I've not even seen the worst of it, but I've seen enough to know what they would have been through. But I'm a great believer in that everything happens for a reason. And I believe that this past year has shaped me into someone that people may not see now or in the near future, but I know that it will come a day when this past year of just daily mental torture will come to benefit. The main message that I wanted to amplify in this video is that if you're watching this and you're currently going through a hard time, you might feel low, you might feel lonely, depressed, or just annoyed with your current situation. Just remember that it's the hardest of times, that given the right attitude, that you're just going to work through it, creates the best of outcomes. For sure, on paper I've had the hardest year of my life so far, and certain people know more why, but at least at the same time, I can hold my head high knowing that I've put this pain to good use. And in reality, a lot of great things have come out of it.
It's currently 2:15 in the morning. I have to be up either 7:30 or 8 at least, probably I have to be up at 7:30 for work, but priorities. So yeah, good night.